Catherine Nelson's case study by Stephen Damron and Cassandra Schmitt. Introduction. The study analyzes 24 spontaneous speech samples. It studies children at 24 months and 30 months of age. It details how corresponding progression can be found in the way modifiers are used in terms of their form, function, and meaning. And it shows how only 6% of multi-word utterances were attributive adjectives and 8% were possessive adjectives in Brown's 1973 summary of Stage 1 speech. The study's primary focus is to investigate this low frequency of modifiers in Stage 1 speech development by examining how modifiers are used during the spontaneous speech of children 24 months and 30 months of age. The study also seeks to determine whether children 24 months and 30 months use adjectives in the variety of functions like adults do. These functions include describing intricacies within present scenarios, specifying between alternatives, and subclassifying further. Transitory objects were described by predicate adjectives. Possessive adjectives are also called attributive adjectives, specifying the differences between physical characteristics like big and small are a product of attributive adjectives. Attributive adjectives are more prominent in children of 30 months. The usage of a particular adjective form is more dependent on its communicational usefulness rather than its syntactic derivation. The child population. Why study these kids? Modifiers are basic to lexical productivity, so examining the way young children use modifiers helps researchers gain more insight into studies dealing with the development of concept formation, attention, memory, and logical thought. Exploring the usage of modifiers by young children is also of interest because it provides a broader insight into the origins of predication. Important functionality information is sometimes overlooked when linguistic analysis is the main focus of researching spontaneous speech samples. Honing in on the functionality of modifiers in speech will give more information on how young children develop a meaningful use for modifiers in speech. Developing speech in children of young ages may exhibit a large amount of form practice involving speech imitation as well as statements with functionality purposes. Study speech elements and milestones. Whether the children used in the study were referential speakers or expressive speakers, that was determined by the percentage of object words in the first 50 words acquired typically by 19 months of age, which was 5 months or 11 months respectively prior to the 24-month and 30-month speech samples retrieved in this study. The study reveals that even the less advanced talkers have expressed the capabilities to use predicates to distinguish between items of the same class, example, Christmas trees versus normal trees, and this indicates that early speakers use predicates to comment on the perceptible world around them. The research questions of this study were: do young children learn and use adjectives in the same forms as adults? And do the differences in speech patterns between expressive speakers and referential speakers persist as the children's speech progresses into more advanced levels? The study methods. 1 or 2 hour speech samples were recorded from 18 children at 24 months, and 16 of these 24-month-old children were also recorded at 30 months of age. 24 children in total. Only the first 100 utterances were used in each of the recordings. Some children were earlier revealed to be expressive speakers, others were discovered to be referential speakers. Which type of speaker the child was determined to be was decided on the basis of the words that they learned and used at the one-word level. Methods continued. The transcripts gathered from the recordings were used based on the mean length of utterance, dividing transcripts into 2 groups depending on the child's age, sex, and vocabulary group, referential or expressive. 7 MLU levels separated by 0.5 morphemes were established from 1.0 to 4.5. The levels were then separated into 2 groups where low proficiency is based 1.0 to 2.5 and high proficiency was considered 2.5 to 4.5. The low proficiency group represents stage 1 to stage 2 language development, while the high proficiency group represents stage 3 to 5 of Brown's 1973 stages. 10 boys and 14 girls were had their transcripts analyzed. Age was unable to be evenly dispersed in this study. This is because children who were in the high proficiency group were expressive speakers and they were all 30 months of age. All low proficiency group expressive speakers were 24 months. Only two 24-month-old recreational speakers were in the high proficiency group. Likewise, only two 30-month-old recreational speakers were in the low proficiency group. This means that researchers could not speculate the influence of age on high and low proficiency speakers beyond what an advanced language or conceptual structure already would be the root cause for. The analysis classifies pre-nominal positioned adjectives as attributives, while the remaining adjectives, whether standing alone like destroyed, for example, or in a predicate phrase such as they're destroyed, were determined to be predicates. The study findings. Recreational speakers were more adaptable to learning object words. This indicates a strong association with objects and their characterization. Expressive speakers used more social personal modifier forms that do not deal with categorizing objects. Recreational speakers, for this reason, appear to use more adjectives than expressive children or be more proficient in how they use modifiers. Recreational speakers at the 2.0 to 2.5 level was represented 3 times in the data, while all 7 levels were represented at least once for each vocabulary group. Out of the 2,400 utterances, 100 per child that comprised the transcripts were measured in regards to noun-verb relations, presence of modifiers, pronouns, quantifiers, distinguishers, and locatives. Of these 2,400 utterances, a nominal modifier appeared every 13.8% of the time, which equals 7.21 utterances for 333 nominal modifiers total. 44% of the predicate adjectives used were done so in single word constructions. Attributive modifiers occur more often than predicate adjectives, which would run parallel to Brown's statement of the sequence of emergence of these forms, although as language development progresses, an increase in the overall usage rate of attributive adjectives is expected regardless of the language type of the speaker. In the low group, the utterance of attributive adjectives to predicate adjectives are nearly identical, but in the high groups, attributive adjectives were muttered nearly 3 times as many times as predicates. These findings run counter to the claim of attributive priority, but the frequent occurrence of single-word utterances in the low group at 62% of all utterances, while the high group only had a frequency of 21% predicate usage, exponentially increases the frequency of predicates being used by the low group, because predicates are by definition one-word utterances, which damper the claims against attributive priority. In the presence of nominal modifiers, big occurred 40 times and little occurred 21 times. Big and little were both used to describe animals, but only one instance of big boy separated a clean sweep of little when describing humans. Example, little girl, little kids. Out of the 60 instances of state words, 34 or 57% were used in conjunction in the nominal form. 16 or 27% were used in accordance with it or that, while 10 or 17% was represented with a functioning noun. This indicates that 83% of state words did not feature a referent. Possessives were used 111 times in the 2,400 overall utterances. 91 of these 111 times were used in the attributive position. Possessive usage is different than state word usage because possessives were more prominently used as referent modifiers, whereas state words were more likely to be predicates. Less children from the recreational group used possessive terms than the expressive children did, in terms of the number of possessives in relation to the number of adjectives. If this disparity were more significant, the findings would point to recreational speakers being more equipped to using adjectives in order to differentiate between properties of similar objects. 5 of the 6 children from the expressive high group had siblings. Only 2 children in the recreational high had any siblings. This reveals that possessive disputes among siblings, example over toys, candy, or parents' attention, may cause an increase in the rate of possessive adjectives used, contributing to their title as an expressive speaker. Expressive speakers are not necessarily less conceptually advanced because they used adjectives as classifiers at a higher rate than referential speakers did. The way in which expressive and referential speakers approach distinguishing differences between objects may differ, but the way in which they use the adjectives to describe a given object are inherently similar. In conclusion, predicate adjectives predominate levels up to 2.5. Attributive adjectives develop in more advanced stages of speech than predicate adjectives and predominate above the MLU level of 2.5. As a child begins to become more advanced in describing objects, they will use type terms to properly specify the characteristics of a particular object, example calling an object big or small. Size is a more popular modifier than color to distinguish the characteristics of an object or person at 2 years of age. At these early stage of development, there appears to be little awareness of using adjectives to grade or negative express opposition to something. Adjectives such as hot and cold were used, but not by the same child. This means that adjectives being used in a negative tone were rare. Referential speakers were more diverse in their usage of adjectives to specify between discerning characteristics between objects, while expressive speakers rely on using possessive modifiers to determine and describe these differences. Overall, speakers 2 years and above should be able to use stative verbs or predicate adjectives to comment on the transient states of objects, be able to classify objects based on size and color or according to possession or use, as well as cross-classify multiple concepts to create a type or class.